Hi, I'm Toro, and welcome to Toro's History Lullabies. All my life, I've needed a little background noise to fall asleep. For years, it was just the hum of a fan or some soft static. But ever since wireless earbuds came into my life, I've found myself drifting off to podcasts and documentaries, learning and relaxing at the same time. That's why I started making these videos. Calming stories from history, told gently, to help you unwind, learn something new, and hopefully fall asleep a little easier. So get comfortable, close your eyes if you'd like, and let's step quietly into the past. And if you enjoy these stories, I'd love it if you gave the video a like and subscribed for more. Sweet dreams.
The World in 1905. Welcome, dear dreamer, and thank you for joining me tonight, here at Toro's History Lullabies. As you settle beneath your blanket and the day fades quietly behind you, let's drift backward, softly, gently, into the year 1905. The world then was not louder or faster, but different in its own hushed and wondrous way. A time of lantern-lit streets, telegrams tapped by hand, and long, slow letters folded carefully into envelopes. The world turned beneath silk hats and snowy parasols, over fields stitched with steam trains and coastal towns just learning to hum with electricity. Tonight, we will visit 1905 like a gentle traveler from afar, peeking in on peaceful moments, quiet revolutions, and the calm murmur of everyday life. So let go of today, and let's dream our way back to a year touched by both invention and introspection. The world awaits in 1905. World events. As the calendar turned to 1905, the globe seemed to pause and listen, to shifting powers, to distant parliaments, to the whispered promises of reform. In the vast expanse of Russia, a slow unrest stirred beneath the snow. The year began with hope and turmoil, the people asking softly, and then more insistently, for change. A quiet petition, carried by workers and families, made its way to the Winter Palace in January. Though the day would be remembered for sorrow, in time it marked the first tremble of what would grow into something greater, a call for representation, for dignity, for voice. By autumn, Tsar Nicholas II had signed the October Manifesto, a document that would create a parliamentary body, the Duma. Though modest and incomplete, it was a first step on a path still being walked. Meanwhile, far across oceans and quiet mountain chains, another story unfolded over calm waters. The Russo-Japanese War, begun the year before, reached its closing chapter. On a ship in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, far from the battlefields, diplomats from Russia and Japan met in soft-spoken negotiation. Guided by President Theodore Roosevelt, the Treaty of Portsmouth was signed in September. Peace, at last, returned to the Pacific. Elsewhere, boundaries were being reshaped without cannon or clash. In Scandinavia, a graceful political parting occurred. Sweden and Norway, long united beneath a single monarch, gently dissolved their union. After a quiet referendum and royal renunciation, Norway stood peacefully as its own kingdom once more, a nation newly dreaming on its own terms. In Persia, the land we now call Iran, murmurs of a constitutional movement rose amid tea houses and city squares. Intellectuals, merchants, and students, with pens and poetry, began to imagine a future framed by laws, not decree. The movement would gather over coming years, but 1905 held its first brave stirrings. And in faraway India, the gentle resistance of words began to bloom. The Partition of Bengal, drawn by British rulers, sparked peaceful protests and petitions. It was not yet revolution, but it was a lullaby of resolve sung in local tongues. Thus, 1905 moved not in storms, but in tides, slow changes, peaceful awakenings, and patient hands building futures not yet seen. Daily life around the world. If you stepped quietly into a home in 1905, whether in Paris, Kyoto, Cairo, or New York, you would first notice the silence. No hum of appliances, no buzz of electricity in every room. Just the clink of a spoon in a cup, the soft creak of wood beneath feet, the ticking of a cherished clock. In much of Europe, men wore long coats and stiff collars, and women laced up boots and corsets each morning. their hair swept into gentle waves or careful buns. Children played in knickers and pinafores, their laughter echoing down cobbled streets lined with gas lamps and horse-drawn carts. In the countryside, farmers rose with the dawn, their hands deep in earth, their barns filled with the smell of hay and the lowing of cattle. Meals were often stews, warm and filling, cooked slowly over coal or wood-burning stoves. Bread was delivered fresh, wrapped in paper, carried home underarm. In Japan, daily life was a graceful blend of tradition and modernity. Wooden homes with sliding doors still nestled beside quiet gardens, but city centers now flickered with trams and telegraph wires. People wore kimono and Western suits side by side, sipping green tea and reading morning papers in both kanji and Roman letters. In Egypt, women carried baskets through bazaars fragrant with spices and dates, while the Nile flowed calmly under the watchful gaze of feluccas and stone temples. In South America, families gathered in haciendas and city plazas alike, sharing stories, fresh fruit, and the rhythm of new ideas. Evenings brought lamplight and lullabies. Families gathered around fires. Children read from primers or listened to stories handed down through generations. In cities, music floated from parlors and ballrooms, violins and gramophones, the soft clatter of shoes on wooden floors. It was a world quieter than ours, yet rich in rhythm, scent, and texture. A world not yet rushed, where each day unfolded with a kind of measured wonder. Science, inventions, and technology in the world of 1905, progress whispered, not shouted. This was the year that Albert Einstein, still working in a patent office in Switzerland, published 4 quiet but revolutionary papers. He pondered the speed of light, the nature of space and time, and tiny particles moving in constant motion. These thoughts, scribbled in notebooks and sent to journals, would one day change the way we understand the universe. But in 1905, they arrived like soft sparks in the vast night of knowledge, unnoticed by most, but quietly eternal. Elsewhere, motion itself was being reimagined. Automobiles, once rare curiosities, became more common on dusty roads. The Ford Motor Company was still perfecting its Model N, and while the assembly line had not yet arrived, the dream of cars for every family had begun to bloom. In the skies, 2 brothers, Orville and Wilbur Wright, continued their experiments with flight. Though their famous flight had occurred in 1903, by 1905 they had built a flyer that could stay aloft for over half an hour. In open fields near Dayton, Ohio, their gliders floated like dragonflies. Delicate, daring, and destined for history. On the seas, wireless telegraphy connected ships to shore with dots and dashes. Guglielmo Marconi's radio transmissions stretched farther than ever before, and messages crossed oceans on unseen waves. Voices still had no place on airwaves, but news and weather now traveled faster than clouds. Electricity crept into more homes, slowly, softly, bringing light to bedrooms and kitchens where once only candles had danced. Yet gaslight still held on, and many a twilight glow came from a flickering mantle, not a bulb. Thus, the world of invention in 1905 was not flashy or loud, but quietly miraculous. Each idea a pebble, gently dropped into the still waters of time. Culture and the arts in 1905, the arts blossomed with quiet elegance. In music halls and drawing rooms, a new kind of sound floated through the air, expressive, emotional, and modern. Claude Debussy's dreamy harmonies drifted from French pianos, as though his fingers were painting water with notes. And in Vienna, Gustav Mahler's sweeping symphonies stirred the hearts of concertgoers, each crescendo a breath drawn slowly, then released into the night. In Russia, ballet spun with grace and grandeur. Audiences marveled at the swan, danced by Anna Pavlova, whose gentle arms and delicate motion captured the beauty of nature itself. Her performances, light as snow on still water, would inspire generations. The art world, too, was shifting. In Paris, brushstrokes grew bold and impressionistic. Henri Matisse, with colors that hummed and shapes that softened the real, began a new chapter in modern art. His work, though daring to some, felt like dreams dipped in sunlight, vibrant yet calm. Literature remained a refuge. In England, Yem Forster was beginning the pages that would become where angels fear to tread, exploring quiet moments and inner landscapes. In America, Edith Wharton's pen traced the refined sadness of high society, her words both elegant and wistful. And in India, Rabindranath Tagore's poetry, written in Bengali, then whispered around the world, offered readers solace and soul. Meanwhile, in theaters, silent films flickered like shadow plays. Audiences gasped, laughed, and leaned in close as moving pictures played for the very first time. There were no words, only gestures and music, and yet, whole worlds came to life on screen. These early reels were short, simple, and full of wonder. The arts in 1905 were not yet thunderous or world-shaking. They were blooming gently, a prelude to a century of creativity, whispered first through ballet slippers, ink pens, and violins. Media and headlines. If you were to pick up a newspaper in 1905, folded neatly and tucked under someone's arm, you'd find a blend of curiosity and calm. The headlines moved more slowly then. Papers spoke of treaties, royal visits, new train lines, and rising voices for reform. There were numbered 24-hour news cycles, no endless scroll. Only crisp print, careful typesetting, and the rustle of pages turned with a morning cup of tea. Magazines like Harper's Weekly, The Strand, and the Illustrated London News brought stories from afar, with engravings and early photographs, each image a rare treasure. Advertisements were charming and simple. One might read, "Ladies' gloves, 2 shillings a pair," or phonographs, a marvel for the parlor. A loaf of bread, in many places, cost just a few pennies. The most popular forms of news traveled by word of mouth, by letter, or by the evening post. Even gossip had a slower, more graceful pace. To read the news in 1905 was not to be overwhelmed, but gently informed, a quiet ritual to start or end the day. People born/died the year 1905 saw the arrival of souls who would one day shape the world, and the gentle departure of those who had already left their mark. In a modest home in Austria, a boy named Christian Dior was born. One day, his name would flutter on silk and lace, dressing a century in beauty. But in 1905, he was just an infant swaddled in quiet promise. Also born this year was Jean-Paul Sartre, philosopher, thinker, writer. Though his thoughts would one day stir deep questions about existence, he arrived simply, without fanfare, into a world still lit by gaslight. In America, Henry Fonda was born in a small town in Nebraska. He would one day grace the screen with calm resolve, but in 1905, he was a soft cry in the heartland night. And gently, the world said goodbye to Jules Verne, the father of adventure tales, the dreamer of submarines and moon voyages. He passed away in March, leaving behind stories that still sail through imaginations today. His pen was set down, but his journeys live on. As the circle of life turned in 1905, it did so with reverence, soft beginnings, and equally soft farewells. As December snow fell across rooftops and lanterns glowed warmly through window panes, the world of 1905 slowed and listened. The year had been one of movement, not in jolts, but in measured turns. Political tides shifted softly. Science opened unseen doors. Voices called gently for fairness, light, and truth. People ended the year much as they had begun it, writing letters by candlelight, dreaming beside stoves, wrapping children in blankets against the cold. Yet something had shifted. The hush of change was in the air. In drawing rooms, families spoke of Parliament, peace treaties, and the marvel of machines that flew. In cafes, poets wrote about time and light, even if they didn't yet know of Einstein's equations. And on distant farms, under starry skies, young dreamers looked upward, wondering what the next year or the next century might bring. It was a world caught between old and new. Horse-drawn carts and motor cars shared the road. Gaslight and electric bulbs twinkled side by side. Handwritten letters still journeyed across oceans, but wireless signals had begun to whisper across waves. As 1905 drew to a close, the world wrapped itself in winter and wonder. It looked back at the year's slow revelations and looked forward to all that lay ahead, not with fear, but with calm hope. And somewhere, in the deep hush of New Year's Eve, a clock struck 12, not to signal an ending, but the next gentle page in the story of time. Thank you, dear listener, for wandering back through time with me tonight. If you enjoyed this gentle journey into the world of 1905, I invite you to softly like, subscribe, and follow Toro's History Lullabies so you'll never miss a night of timeless dreaming. There are many more years to visit, each with its own hush, its own rhythm, its own story to lull us into rest. Until then, sleep well, dream deeply, and I'll see you again in the next chapter of history. Good night.